Every afternoon, just as the sun softened over the crowded street, 12-year-old Ian pushed open the squeaky glass door of Rosie's diner. It wasn't a fancy place. Just 6 red stools, 4 cracked booths, and a counter that smelled faintly of butter and warm bread. But for Ian, whose stomach often growled louder than the traffic outside, Rosie's was a sanctuary. He never said much when he walked in. A quiet nod, a small smile, and he would slip into the last booth by the window. Rosie, a stout woman with silver hair pinned in a bun, always noticed him instantly. She would lift a finger to signal, one moment, pretending to be following some unspoken rule, but the truth was simple: she had already prepared a plate before he arrived. Ian didn't pay, he couldn't. But Rosie never asked. She placed a warm dish, sometimes scrambled eggs, sometimes a half sandwich, sometimes just a bowl of soup, on the table and acted like it was leftovers she needed to get rid of. "Can't waste good food, right?" she'd say. Ian would respond with the same shy nod each day. He wasn't homeless, but life at home had grown tough since his father passed away. His mother worked long hours, sometimes returning empty-handed because work was scarce. Ian tried helping by cleaning shoes after school, earning a few coins when lucky, but even that wasn't enough to fill their kitchen. Rosie's generosity kept him going. Other customers noticed him, but no one questioned it. Some left an extra tip. Some looked away, but everyone knew Rosie's heart was too big to argue with. And Ian, though quiet, left an impression: respectful, grateful, never asking for more than what was offered. He became a part of the diner's rhythm. The chime of the bell meant Ian had arrived. The closing of his empty plate meant he was heading home. It was a routine so steady that no one expected it to change. But life has a way of twisting even the most consistent stories. And one Thursday evening, when the diner hummed with its usual chatter and Rosie hummed along with the radio, the door opened, and in walked a man whose presence immediately shifted the air. The diner's bell jingled differently that afternoon, sharper somehow, as if announcing more than the arrival of a customer. Ian looked up from his half-eaten toast. His eyes widened slightly. The door had opened to reveal a man unlike anyone Rosie's diner had ever seen. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, with polished shoes that gleamed under the dim diner lights. His hair was neatly combed, and his presence carried a quiet authority that made people glance up from their meals. There was an aura about him, a kind of wealth and confidence that seemed to shift the atmosphere, making the small diner feel both smaller and larger at the same time. "Good afternoon," the man said, his voice smooth and pleasant. He looked around the diner, taking in the peeling paint, the cracked tiles, and the worn red stools as if he were noticing them for the first time. Then his gaze fell on Ian. The boy quickly averted his eyes, not used to being noticed by anyone outside Rosie. But there was something in the millionaire's look, an unexpected warmth, that made Ian stay rooted to the booth. Rosie stepped forward, apron slightly wrinkled, hands clasped in front of her. "Welcome," she said, her voice steady despite the flutter in her chest. "What can I get you?" The man smiled and walked over to the counter. "I'll have whatever you recommend," he said. But his eyes kept darting back to the boy, curious, thoughtful, almost searching. He didn't seem to be in a rush. Ian's heart pounded in his chest. He had never been so aware of his own smallness: his torn shoes, his faded shirt, the plate of food that always seemed too small but was always enough to make him thankful. He wanted to shrink further into the booth, but something about the man's gentle gaze made him stay. Rosie, sensing a shift, decided to step aside. "This is Ian," she said casually, though her voice carried pride and protectiveness. "He comes by every day." The millionaire knelt slightly, bringing himself closer to the boy's level. "Hello, Ian," he said kindly. "I hear you're quite a regular here. Mind if I sit for a moment?" Ian nodded slowly, unsure if he should speak. Hello," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. For the first time, someone was looking at him not with pity or curiosity, but with genuine interest. A spark of hope flickered in his chest, tiny, fragile, but undeniable. Rosie returned behind the counter, silently observing the unfolding scene. She had no idea that this brief encounter would change Ian's life forever. The millionaire ordered a simple cup of coffee and watched Ian eat, occasionally asking questions about school, hobbies, and dreams. Each word made Ian sit a little taller, speak a little clearer. And in the quiet hum of the diner, a connection was forming, one that neither of them could yet imagine would transform everything. The diner had grown quieter as the afternoon wore on, the usual chatter fading to the soft hum of the old refrigerator and the distant clatter of dishes. Ian had finished his plate and sat quietly, hands folded on the table, eyes lowered. The millionaire, Mr. Rahman, leaned back slightly on his stool, studying the boy with a thoughtful expression. There was something in Ian's demeanor that struck him, not just the shyness or the hunger, but a resilience, a quiet determination that shone through despite his circumstances. He didn't complain, didn't demand, didn't whine. He simply lived, and he simply endured. Mr. Rahman glanced at Rosie. "You've been helping him every day?" he asked, genuine curiosity lacing his tone. Rosie shrugged modestly. "I do what I can," she replied. "He's a good boy, polite, smart, but life hasn't been kind. His mother works long hours, and his father passed away. Sometimes, I'm all he has." The millionaire nodded slowly. Something stirred within him, a mixture of empathy and an instinctive urge to help. He had seen countless children in need, yet there was something unique about Ian, something that reminded him of his own struggles as a boy growing up in a modest neighborhood. He knew, in that instant, that he couldn't simply walk away. "Tell me about your school," he asked gently, turning back to Ian. The boy's eyes widened, surprised that someone of this man's stature would care. I study at Greenfield Primary. I like science and drawing. I want to be an engineer someday," Ian said, his voice timid but proud. "An engineer, Mr. Rahman repeated, smiling. "That's a noble goal. You know, dreams are like seeds. They need the right soil, care, and attention to grow." Ian nodded, unsure why a stranger was suddenly speaking so seriously to him. The millionaire's gaze shifted toward Rosie. "He's bright. He has potential. And yet, circumstances like these can easily close doors before a child even gets to try." Rosie's eyes shimmered. She knew what he was implying, and her heart both soared and sank. "I've done what I could, but I'm not rich, just hopeful." Mr. Rahman's decision crystallized in that moment. He could not let hope alone determine this boy's future. He would act, quietly, decisively. He would remove the barriers that had held Ian back. "Rosie," he said finally, his tone firm but kind, "I want to help him. I want to make sure he gets the education, the resources, everything he needs to reach that dream." Ian's mouth fell open slightly. He didn't fully understand, but the warmth spreading through him was unmistakable. For the first time, he felt that the world wasn't entirely against him, that someone, unexpectedly, believed in him. The next morning, Ian arrived at Rosie's diner with the same hesitant steps, expecting nothing more than the usual plate of breakfast and quiet solitude. But the diner felt different somehow, brighter, more alive. Rosie greeted him with a mysterious smile that made his stomach flip with curiosity. "Good morning, Ian," she said warmly. "Someone asked me to give this to you." She handed him a small envelope. The boy's fingers trembled as he opened it. Inside was a neatly written letter, accompanied by a crisp scholarship form and a note from Mr. Rahman himself. His eyes darted from the letter to Rosie, and then back to the envelope. What is this?" Ian stammered. Rosie knelt beside him, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. "It's an opportunity, Ian. Someone believes in you. Someone wants to make sure you have everything you need to go to school, to learn, to grow." The words sank in slowly. Ian's mind raced. He had always dreamed of becoming an engineer, but dreams had felt fragile, fragile as the thin plate of toast in front of him each day. Now, the idea that someone could actually make this dream possible was almost unbelievable. Later that week, Mr. Rahman returned to the diner, not as a stranger, but as a guide and mentor. He spoke with Ian about school supplies, tutors, and even extra classes to help him catch up. Each word was like a seed planting hope in the boy's heart. For the first time, Ian realized that the world could be kinder than he had imagined. That hunger, fear, and struggle did not have to define his future. The millionaire didn't just offer money or food, he offered belief, guidance, and a chance to step into a new life. Rosie watched the interaction quietly, her chest swelling with pride and relief. All those mornings she had given Ian breakfast, all the silent encouragements, all the small gestures of care, they had led to this. And somehow, in that modest diner, she felt that she had witnessed something extraordinary, the turning point of a young boy's life. Days turned into weeks, and Ian's routine began to change. His school uniform was no longer patched and faded, but neat and clean. He carried books with crisp covers and sharpened pencils. His steps were lighter, more confident, as he walked to school each day, knowing that someone believed in his potential. Even at the diner, his visits became a celebration rather than mere survival. He would sit with Rosie for a moment of conversation, sharing his small victories and newfound knowledge. The once hungry boy now radiated determination, his eyes sparkling with dreams no longer just whispered to the night sky, but being nurtured into reality. And though the city outside remained bustling, unforgiving, and relentless, inside Rosie's diner, a small miracle had taken root. A young boy who once lived on scraps had been given more than food. He had been given a chance to rise, to dream, and ultimately, to transform his own destiny.